Good morning, everybody. I have a couple minutes. I thought I would hop on here super quick to tell you my 3 most important tips that you need to be able to say to your client at the very first session. And I also want to tell you a couple tiny things that I make sure to do when someone is brand new to coming to therapy. So don't forget, people are super nervous, vulnerable, overwhelmed, really frightened, feeling disconnected, traumatized. They could be in crisis. This could be their very first time reaching out for help. Whatever it might be, even if they've been to a lot of therapy before, it's a very overwhelming experience to come into a waiting room and start the process of therapy. So when you greet them, you want to keep that in mind. You want to talk slowly. You want to move a little slower. You want to hand them their intake form with a lot of gentleness and warmth. You really want to just like move in a really easy, gentle, predictable way, because you don't know where people are coming from and you don't know what their experience is like. They might have, had a very stressful time trying to find your location. My office is not easy to find, so I often start with, oh, did you find your way okay? This is a hard office to find, so I'm automatically validating their experience, even just getting in the door. I hand them their intake form. It's super, super short. I'm not a big believer in a giant amount of paperwork that a client would fill out at the very first session. If you feel like you need more written paperwork from them, you can certainly hand them something at the end of their session. And ask them to fill it out and bring it back with them next time. But I don't think it's important that you get a lot of written information from them. I think you just need the basics, especially if you're just opening their file. If you're going to take insurance, you need a few important pieces of information from them, like their insurance card and their driver's license. But my intake form, I just have on a little clipboard, and I'm going to actually create this as something that you guys could maybe download and copy. It's not the end-all be-all intake form, but it's worked for me for about 20 years. I just have basic client information, the responsible party information. This section's really important because I have had a client who had a medical episode in one of her sessions one time, so I had to quickly reach for the emergency contact information and call her spouse to come and pick her up because she wasn't capable of driving her car after the session was over. She had like a low blood sugar issue. So that's always important to have on file, and you want to have that handy. And then the insurance information and a little bit of medical information. On the second page, it's just a read and sign. It's basically your agreement to, your consent to treatment, your agreement to pay, and release of information for insurance reimbursement. It's very, very simple. They just have to initial yes or no and sign and date. So it is so fascinating to me, though, how many times people start to fill out their intake form and end up just doing like the first section and skipping all the rest and not even reading or signing the second page. If that's the case, you just grab their stuff and you bring them into your office and you sit down and you let them get settled for a minute. You offer them something to drink. I always have tea and water available for my clients. I find that to be kind of a warm, welcoming way to encourage hydration and to give them maybe a warm cup in their hands. I'm practicing in Michigan, so it's a little chilly here most of the half of the year. So it's nice to have a little cup of tea for them if they want that. But I sometimes will then just kind of briefly look over anything. If there's something super important that I need them to fill out, like the emergency contact person, I'll ask them for that, and I can kind of jot it down for them if they're feeling too overwhelmed to complete the form themselves. But the most important things that you need to do at every session, and I do this at the top, 2 of them I do at the top of my session, and 1 of them I do at the end of my session, is I always say when somebody sits down, I say to them, okay, there are 2 important things that I want to go over real quick before we get into, what brought you here today. And that is that I have a pretty tight cancellation policy. So if you can give me a 24-hour notice, that would be greatly appreciated. You're welcome to text me, call, email, message, whatever you want to do. You'll never interrupt me at home, even if you're texting in the middle of the night, because I leave my phone on silent. I'm not a 24/7 operation. So that gives them freedom to send me a text if they're sick in the middle of the night or something happens, or they want to write me on a weekend and tell me they can't come to a Monday appointment. I'd rather know that, because then I can fill it with my cancellation wait list. The other thing I always say is your confidentiality is very important to me, and your confidentiality will never be jeopardized unless there's an intent to hurt yourself or someone else. So I try to make that really clear up front. I also live in a really small town. Grosse Pointe, Michigan is like a little tiny town. It feels like a small town America. And I often run into my clients at Trader Joe's or Kroger or at the gym or at the swimming pool. So I always tell them, you're welcome to wave to me and come up to me, but I will never greet you. Because I don't want to jeopardize their confidentiality. So sometimes people will come back and be like, I saw you at Trader Joe's, but you didn't even smile or you didn't even wave to me. And it's like, I don't want to breach your confidentiality. So I think those two things are really important to just start out with right as you start your session, and then get into their process. It gives them kind of also a little second of transition time, because they can hear you say a couple things before they have to sort of, start talking. And it can be really overwhelming when they make that transition from the waiting room to your couch or chair. At the end of sessions, I will also talk in another Facebook Live in a few weeks or days to come about how to transition out of a session at the end of a session, because a lot of people are talking about, time management. How do I let somebody know that I'm, trying to end the session? That's like a whole chapter. There's a finesse to that, and there's certain things you can say and certain things you can do with your body to indicate that the session is coming to a close. I've seen some therapists say that they have like a little timer or a chime that goes off at the end of their session, or like maybe 5 minutes prior to the end of session. I don't know if I love that idea. I feel like there's a lot of really important information that happens in the last 10 minutes of a therapy session. And so I would hate to kind of interrupt that with a bell or like a buzzer. But, to each their own. Everybody has a way that works for them. But at the end of the session, I will get up and move to my desk to get my phone, which indicates we're ready to reschedule. But before I do that, I just say, if this at a first session, I always say, if this feels like a good fit to you, would you like to try to reschedule? Because I also never want to assume that this is a good fit for them. So I think it's important that you say those kinds of things, because then it will help them, be able to have the power to decide whether or not they feel like they want to reschedule. And sometimes people will say, let me think about it. Or sometimes I'm going to say, I want to make sure that you're getting the best care possible. And I feel, and early on in my practice, sometimes I would get a client or two that wasn't the right fit for me or my expertise. If I went all the way through the whole session, I would say at the end, I really want to make sure that you're getting the best care. You deserve the best care. Your issues sound like they're a little bit outside of my area of expertise. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a few referrals. And so sometimes I would do it that way. But sometimes I have actually stopped somebody midway through a first session if I feel like it is way outside my specialty, or if I feel like it is something that I just don't feel like I have the expertise in. And so, or sometimes I've even felt like they needed to be seen right away by a psychiatrist, or even have like an inpatient evaluation done. So I've taken care of it that way too, even in the middle of a session. But at the very end of a first time session, if everything's going fine and you agree to continue working with them, then you can say, I always take a credit card on file. So that if you have a copay or a deductible, or you're paying out of pocket, I can run that for you rather than mailing you an invoice and having you send it back in. It just seems to be a little bit easier. But I do tell them that there's sometimes a percentage fee for running a credit card, and they should be aware of that. If they don't want to do that, they don't have to have their sessions run on credit card, but you really do want to get a card on file, because if they have a no-show, for example, I have a policy where they are charged the full session fee if they no-show or late cancel me. And that has protected me many times from, people who, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little distracted. I'm making sure that my 10:30 person's coming here pretty soon, so I want to make sure I have enough time to wrap this up. But I do feel like having that credit card on file will protect you in general. So even if they say, no, I'd rather write a check, or I'd rather pay with cash, or I'll, use a different card next time or something, I try to really do encourage them to keep a credit card on file. I find that it really helps you, and most patients appreciate that you're running the card for them. At the beginning of my day, I sit down and run all my copays if I already know what they are. That way, I don't have to worry about billing them later. So those are just some really important things. Remember to have a simple intake form. Remember, clients are super overwhelmed when they're coming to see you. Give them plenty of time to fill out their paperwork. Ask them to arrive a few minutes early so they don't feel rushed. I like to give them tea or water before they come in, show them where the restroom is, give them kind of all that gentle information up front, but in a very calm, slow way, because you don't want to overwhelm them with too much information. And then I always talk at the top of the session about the two most important kind of things for policy and housekeeping issues. I always say about the cancellation policy. I always talk about confidentiality. And then we get into their session. And at the very end of the session, we ask, if this feels like a good fit for you, would you like to reschedule? I'd be happy to reschedule for you. And that indicates like we're wrapping up. And then we go ahead and reschedule their next appointment. And then I take their card on file for future charges. So I hope that helps you with your first-time clients. And let me know what other tips that you have if you're already an existing practitioner in practice. I would love to hear some of your tips for first-time sessions with new patients. Talk to you soon. Have a good day.